So the mindset we've adopted around nutrition is not our own. What has happened is that these large mega corporations, these industrial foods, have hijacked our minds and exploited them for profit. And what I mean by that is that they have teams of scientists, they have laboratories, they have entire facilities dedicated to trick your brain into wanting these foods. They make them as addictive and as hyper palatable as possible. And the way they do that is by putting all these artificial ingredients in there, these additives, these preservatives, all these things that are not natural, that literally hijack your biological systems and make you crave these foods. And the way that happens for the most part is that it's metabolic disruption. Essentially, it is giving you calories, quote unquote calories. We're going to get into the calories thing, but it is very nutrient void. So what happens is your body has an extreme dopamine response. I mean, your reward centers are set off like fireworks. As soon as you eat these foods, it tastes great. It satisfies you. It satisfies every part of your body initially when you consume this food. It just tastes good. It's full of a bunch of sugars and processed carbohydrates and things like that make you feel satisfied, that make you feel happy. And it spikes all these reward centers, but then there's no nutrients. So you eat these foods and it may be 1,000 calories, and then an hour later you're hungry and you're starving for more. And then you go back to these foods because, again, they're extremely palatable, they're very tasty, they taste great, they're addictive, and they do nothing but leave you wanting more. I mean, there are literally teams of people that all they do their entire day is studying how people buy. They study human behavior and they figure out exactly where to place these foods in grocery stores. They figure out what kind of logos to use, what colors to use, and all this stuff. And it's all designed to draw you in like moth to a flame. I mean, it really is. It draws you into these foods and you consume them. You don't think about what's in these foods. You don't think about what you're consuming, what you're doing to your body at all. And before you know it, your health's destroyed. You got metabolic dysfunction. You're overweight. You're obese. You have cancer, diabetes. All these things are happening to you. And again, you're being exploited. You're being exploited for your money. And that's all this is. And then on top of that, you've got studies that are being funded by a lot of these corporations that make the food, and a lot of these people that stand to make a lot of money off of getting more people to buy this food. You got studies that are being funded by these people, and they're saying that this stuff is healthy, and they're demonizing the actual healthy food, saying that red meat's bad for you, saying that saturated fat's bad for you. All these things that we've been eating for our entire existence. I mean, since humans have existed, we've been eating these foods, but this stuff gets demonized. And then they promote all these other things as being healthy. And it's all cheap, processed, very profitable foods that are toxic. I mean, they're essentially toxic. There are so many things in there that makes the food toxic. Now, there was a time in the not so distant past where we saw food for what it really was. And that is a biological requirement to fulfill the fundamental functions of our body. We ate intuitively. Our bodies craved exactly what we needed, and we listened to our body. We didn't have to weigh our food. We didn't have to count calories. We didn't have to rely on sophisticated computer programs and applications to figure out what the heck we're supposed to be eating. We were eating foods that we knew were intuitively good for us, and we were thriving. I found a way that allowed me to retrain my mind and the way I think about nutrition, and it has allowed me to stay 100% dedicated, no problem. And that way is the carnivore diet, 100%. The carnivore diet has allowed me to retrain my mind, eat intuitively, and eat the foods I know and my body knows are the best for me. And what it's made me realize is that calories are irrelevant. And I know this is very controversial. I know it is. And there's a lot of arguing and a lot of disdain around this topic. But let me explain this, because I think this is a little different than the typical argument. The reason I say calories are irrelevant is because, number one, and this is usually what people talk about when they talk about calories being irrelevant, the metric they use to describe calories is essentially putting a food into, I guess what you would really call a furnace. They put the food in a fire and they see how long it takes to burn this food. And depending on how long it takes to burn this food determines how much energy potential the food actually has. But the problem with this method is that our bodies obviously aren't furnaces. We don't process food thermally. I mean, we really don't. It's very complex biological systems that even mainstream modern scientists don't fully understand. So relying on this skewed metric to help us understand food and how much energy potential it has is completely flawed from the get-go. But on top of that, the idea that food is used as energy, that's where I have a problem. Because what eating carnivore has made me realize is that food is not energy. It is not energy potential. Food is a biological requirement that is required to fulfill the very complex biological systems in our body. It is a requirement to nourish, regenerate, and grow every single cell in our body. It is not made to give us energy. I think energy is a byproduct of us being properly nourished, and we get energy when all those fundamental requirements are met. But until those requirements are met, we don't really get the energy we need. Because if you notice, when we eat these hyper-processed foods, we may get energy initially, but that energy quickly rises and then it falls drastically, like straight down. And I think that's one of the big problems with these hyper-processed food is that you have all these things in there that are tricking your biological system. They're tricking your mind. And it's giving you that spike of energy. So you think it's sustaining you and you think it's good for you. But then you get that crash at the end. And I think that's the big problem. So what it's made me realize is that calories, the whole idea around calories and it being energy is just completely flawed. Because it should be thought of as nutrients. And I don't care what anybody says, and this is just my thought. 7 years I've been looking into this. And I've been looking into nutrition way before that, because when I started bodybuilding, I really started digging deep in nutrition. And this was the more mainstream approach to nutrition. So it was like, whole grains and eating non-processed food, but just whole foods and what food does to you, like metabolically when you consume it, to gain muscle and things. I mean, it was very important to learn that kind of stuff. And I started learning about that in 2005. And then since then, when I got sick in 2017, from then till now, has been nothing but research about nutrition. My research has gotten more into the off the beaten path type of research, where it's more of they've been lying to us about all these different kinds of foods that we should be consuming, and what they're telling us is healthy isn't actually healthy. It's the opposite. That's the kind of research I've been getting into. So I've basically looked at everything. I mean, I've looked at a lot of this stuff. And what I've found, and again, this is my opinion, but a calorie is not a calorie. Hands down, full stop. A calorie is not a calorie. If you have a Twinkie that is 1,000 calories and you set that next to a grass-fed ribeye that is 1,000 calories, you cannot tell me that Twinkie is providing you the same nourishment that grass-fed ribeye is. Or let's say it was grass-fed liver. 1,000 calories of liver is not providing the same nutrients as that Twinkie. The Twinkie is providing you with that the calories, the energy potential, which is basically processed sugars, it's processed carbohydrates, and a bunch of other stuff that's hijacking your metabolic systems. It's providing you with that. And the grass-fed liver or the grass-fed ribeye is providing you with essential nutrients that your body needs to regenerate and grow, to heal. That's the difference. Because when we focus on calories, we're only focusing on a small subset of a very, very important topic. And the very important thing that we're missing when we focus on calories is the nutrient profile. So I think if we can reframe the way we think about food and think about it in terms of nutrient potential, and not just nutrient potential, but the bioavailability of those nutrients, how many of those are you able to convert and use, then it becomes really interesting. Because instead of you eating 1,000 calorie Twinkie and getting no nutrients, and your body being left like starving essentially 30 minutes after you eat this food, instead you eat a grass-fed ribeye or you eat a grass-fed piece of liver that is 1,000 calories, but it's full of all these nutrients, essential nutrients that your body needs, and it fills you up for 16, 18 hours or possibly longer. I think if we can reframe our minds to think about food that way, it takes a lot of the confusion out of it. And I think that's where a lot of people get real confused, is because you eat low calorie, but your health is still a wreck, or you still have these chronic conditions or this metabolic dysfunction, or you still have intense cravings, or you're still overweight. All these things still occur, and you may still get sick because your body is missing all these critical nutrients it actually needs to regenerate and grow. So that's why I think calories are irrelevant. So if you take these things and you couple it with the toxic load of the food, because a lot of these high calorie foods, they're processed, have all these things that are added in there that are just destroying your health. And again, they're hijacking your metabolic system, they're hijacking your biological systems, making your body think it's getting fed certain nutrients and it's receiving certain things when it's actually not. And that, I think, is leading to metabolic dysfunction. It's leading to cravings. It's leading to food addiction. It's leading to all these things that these large mega corporations and these companies want, because it keeps you coming back, it keeps you hungry, and it keeps you wanting more. It makes you a lifelong customer, and not just to the food industry, but to the medical industry as well, because eventually this food is going to take a toll on your body. And I think we're seeing that across the board. I don't think there's any contest to that. I mean, I think it's very clear that these foods are wrecking our health. If you look around the state of our country, 78.9% of all people are overweight or obese. Metabolic dysfunction, things like diabetes, chronic diseases such as cancer, autoimmune conditions, all that's on an extreme rise, like nothing we've ever seen. And the common denominator is always going to be food. I mean, it's food. So, I mean, sure, you can lose weight by eating lower calories. You can lose weight by restricting your calories, by restricting the energy you're consuming. But what are the effects of that? And is it sustainable? Because if you restrict, let's say you're eating 3,000 calories a day, and of those 3,000 calories, the nutrient profile of those calories is just bare minimum. I mean, you're barely scraping by. And let's say you reduce that to 2,000 calories. Well, now you're not only eating at a calorie deficit, you're also eating at a nutrient deficit. So the little nutrients you were getting before, you've now cut that down by 1,000 calories worth of food. So you're getting a whole lot less nutrients than you would before. So your body's going to be craving even more food. That's why you always hear about these diets failing, because people will go on these crash diets and they'll restrict their calories so low, not taking into account that if they didn't change their diet and focus on more nutrient-dense foods and you're still eating a bunch of processed garbage, then the amount of nutrients you're consuming are going to be far less. And your body does not crave calories. It craves nutrients, 100%. That's one of the things I've noticed on Carnivore, is that I do not crave calories themselves. I mean, I don't crave energy potential. I could fast for 100 days and still have energy. My body is craving essential nutrients. When I first went Carnivore and I was extremely sick, and I had been sick and severely deficient, and I lost 85 pounds of lean body mass in 6 months' time, and my body was just craving nutrients, I started eating liver, and I could not get enough of it. I mean, every single meal I was eating liver. And it was like the most intense craving I've ever had for any kind of food. And I mean, I'm a fan of liver. I like liver, but I never thought I liked liver that much. But I was eating it every single meal in pretty large amounts. And that went on for months until it got to the point where my body eventually became satisfied. And whatever deficiency I was trying to override and overcome was fulfilled. And the thought of liver made me sick. Like, it made me absolutely nauseated. And I just couldn't stand the sight of it. So I stopped eating it. And that's where intuition comes in. You know, back in the day, when we were eating foods that we were supposed to be consuming, we were intuitive eaters, just like children are, just like our dogs are. We ate intuitively. We knew what we were supposed to be eating. When we ate too much, we stopped eating. When we were hungry, we started eating. And it was that simple. I mean, there was no complexity to this at all. But the complexity comes in when you start talking about things in, calories out, and then you factor in the nutrient profiles of food and the fact that there's no nutrients in food at all. And then you factor in all the other toxic artificial ingredients and chemicals and stuff like that that's just wreaking havoc on your metabolic system. That's where the confusion comes in. So one of the things I noticed since going carnivore is how much food I actually consume and what it does to my body. And what I mean by that is, back pre-carnivore, back when I was weightlifting, I was powerlifting, and I was 230 pounds. And I went from 145 pounds to 230, eating a calorie surplus of about 1,000 calories, 500 to 1,000 calories on average. I was eating roughly 4,200 calories a day, and it was about 50 to 60% carbohydrates, and the rest was protein and low fat. So my fat was usually around 10 to 15%. It was pretty low, and then the rest was protein. You could say my macro ratio was probably on average about 55, 35, 10, somewhere around there. And that amount of food, 4,200 calories a day on average, was enough for me to go from 145 pounds to 230. So, I mean, I gained a lot of muscle, but I also gained some fat with it, which comes along with bulking, not a problem. But what really made me think about this is that since I've been carnivore, I consistently eat around 4,000 calories a day. And I'm only 175 pounds now. So I was 230 pounds back then, and I was eating 4,200 calories, which means my calorie surplus was actually a little bit smaller. And now I'm eating 4,000 calories on average, and I'm 175 pounds, which means my calorie surplus is even larger because I weigh less. And I probably don't work out nearly as hard as I used to. I know I don't train as hard, and there's times where I'm probably not as active as I was back then either. However, instead of me going from 145 pounds to 230 now, for the last 5 years I've been eating this way, eating on average probably about 4,000 calories a day because I eat a ton of fat. It's usually about a 70% fat, 30% protein, and I stay 175 to 180 pounds year round. It really doesn't matter how much I eat. I mean, I eat that much food and I stay lean. I'm probably about 10% body fat at the moment, and I can gain muscle, but I do not gain fat. But even though I'm eating a higher surplus in calories, I still don't gain weight. I'm still around 10% body fat year round. I eat this 4,000 calories on average every single day, and I just simply don't gain weight. I don't gain fat. I stay lean. I can gain muscle easily, but I don't gain fat. I don't gain weight. So that to me was very telling. That told me that a calorie is not a calorie, because obviously if I was eating 4,200 calories back then, I'm eating roughly 4,000 now. I weigh less. My surplus is more. Technically speaking, if a calorie is a calorie, I should be gaining weight, but that's not the case. So again, I think when we focus on calories, we're focusing on the wrong thing. We need to be focused on nutrients and the nutrient profile of the food. How many nutrients are in the food? And of those nutrients, how many bioavailable nutrients can our body pull from the food and use? And it's that simple. And I believe thinking about it in those simple terms removes a lot of the confusion. It makes it very easy to stick to a way of eating that's going to nourish your body, and it's going to provide your body with exactly what it needs. I'm sure a lot of you out there can relate to this, because the nutritional space is so confusing right now, and there's so much information, there's so much contradiction. It can be really tough to navigate through all this. It's an uphill battle, no matter what. But if you can reframe your thinking and think about food in terms of nutrients instead of calories, because processed food is what's essentially hijacking your metabolic systems and your biological systems, making you crave it. If you can get away from that and focus on nutrient-dense whole foods, I think that's the easiest way to tune into your natural intuition and understand and know what you should and shouldn't be eating. And your body's going to crave what it needs. And honestly, I think that's the fastest way to health. That's how I was able to retrain my mind and think about food in terms of nutrient density, not calories, and stay lean year round and be in the best health of my life at 40 years old. I mean, really, that's all it took. And I say it all the time, but I think the solution to our problems is often right under our noses. And most often than not, it's the simplest solution. It's the simple things, getting back to the basics, focusing on real whole foods, and just cutting out all the processed crap. And it's that simple. It was that simple for me. But I'm really curious on what everybody thinks about this. Like, what your thoughts are on food, how you view food. Do you view it in terms of calories? Do you view it in terms of nutrition? And let me know if you agree or disagree with, viewing food as nutrition versus calories, and if that makes more sense to you. So if you're tired of all the confusion and this resonates with you, feel free to like, subscribe, join the Apex tribe. I'll see you on the next one.